My sister's baby shower was held at a fancy restaurant, but there wasn't a seat for me. She smirked and said, "Why don't you try that dingy pub across the street?" My mom chimed in, "It suits you perfectly." I smiled and replied, "Sure, I'll do that," then quietly walked out. But the moment they saw me step into that pub, their faces went pale. My sister's baby shower took place at an upscale restaurant, but it turned out there wasn't a seat reserved for me. "Why don't you give that dingy pub across the street a try?" my sister suggested. My mom quickly added, "It seems more your style, dear." I managed a smile and said, I think I will," before quietly making my exit. However, when they caught sight of me actually stepping into the pub, their faces turned ashen. Sometimes your own family can be the cruelest. The invitation, printed on fine, heavy paper, showcased her sister Melanie's handwriting, which was, as always, perfect. Not a single imperfection, much like her life. Elizabeth, adorned in a light gray silk dress, examined her reflection in the restaurant's expansive glass doors. Her makeup was tasteful and understated, and a simple pearl necklace, a quiet gleam at her throat, was a gift she'd treated herself to when she launched her first restaurant 10 years prior. Lavian, occupying the top floor of the Four Seasons Hotel Boston, provided a luxurious setting with views overlooking the Beacon Hill cityscape. It masterfully blended old Boston tradition with sleek, modern sophistication. Elizabeth understood precisely why this location had been chosen. She'd heard that her sister Melanie's husband, James Clark, frequently brought his investment banking clients here. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" Elizabeth handed over her invitation at the entrance for the Wilson Clark baby shower. The receptionist gave Elizabeth a swift, assessing glance before consulting the guest list. Elizabeth fully grasped the unspoken message in that look. She was likely noted down as the sister who works at a pub. That was a decade-old fabrication, or rather, a narrative her family had constructed themselves. Dozens of guests had already convened in the lavishly decorated venue, mingling under the soft glow of chandeliers. Women dressed in the latest designer fashions chatted gracefully, champagne flutes in hand. Tables were draped in white linen and adorned with pastel blue floral arrangements. At the heart of it all was Melanie, 7 months pregnant, looking as though she'd stepped directly out of a fashion magazine. She wore an expensive maternity dress, a diamond necklace from her husband James sparkling at her neck. Beside her stood their mother Carol with immaculate hair and makeup, clad in luxury brands. They were encircled by members of the Newton Country Club. Carol was a woman who had climbed the social ladder as a former real estate agent, fiercely protective of her social standing. She had imposed strict expectations on her daughters. Melanie, at least, had met them. Elizabeth, conversely, had always been a source of disappointment in her mother's view. "Well, Elizabeth, you made it." Her mother's voice carried a trace of surprise mixed with faint disappointment. That tone was a familiar echo of words repeated countless times in Elizabeth's memories over the past 10 years. Elizabeth had only met with them once or twice a year at family functions. It was a decision that suited everyone. Her mother and sister resided in an affluent suburban neighborhood, deeply involved in their new social scene. Elizabeth, they believed, led a quiet existence downtown. In truth, Elizabeth was the owner and chef of the Hidden Gem, a high-end restaurant nestled in a renovated red brick building in the Beacon Hill district. Her establishment was a favorite among Harvard professors and old money families. However, she only appeared in the media as Chef Liz, and maintained no social media presence. The restaurant's acclaim spread purely through word of mouth and gourmet publications, boasting a consistent 3-month waiting list. But her family remained oblivious to all of this. As Elizabeth scanned the room, she observed the place cards neatly arranged on the tables. Yet, she couldn't find her name anywhere. She noticed Melanie's close friends casting glances her way and whispering amongst themselves. They were all from the same private school as Melanie and belonged to the same country club. "Is that the sister everyone talks about? The one who works in a pub, right?" These remarks were deliberately loud enough for her to hear. Elizabeth took a deep breath and smiled with composure. Within her, there was a quiet confidence that had matured over a decade. Elizabeth walked slowly through the venue, the chandelier light casting dancing shadows at her feet. White tablecloths covered the tables, with pastel blue centerpieces elegantly arranged. Many of the guests were familiar figures from Newton's social circles. As she passed, conversations would halt for a moment, then resume as whispers. Those whispers drifted through the room like a faint breeze. Elizabeth persisted in her search for her name card. 10 round tables, each set for 12, every place marked with the name on high-quality paper. But nowhere could she find Elizabeth Wilson. In one corner, hotel staff were arranging finger foods, smoked salmon canapes, caviar-topped blinis, truffle-flavored quiches. Elizabeth noted minor imperfections in each presentation. A professional's eye is always critical. Elizabeth, even though you came all this way, Melanie approached, her voice tinged with a false warmth. You seem to be having a little trouble finding your seat. Elizabeth simply smiled in return. Behind Melanie, her husband James eyed Elizabeth with the sharp scrutiny of an investment banker. We had a sudden surge in guests, you see? Melanie feigned an apologetic look, though her eyes were crinkling with amusement. We had to give priority to our important guests. Elizabeth understood the implication perfectly. She wasn't an important guest. She never could be. But don't worry. Melanie's voice became brighter, as if a brilliant idea had just struck her. Why don't you try that shabby little pub across the street? That might be more your scene. Her words rippled through the venue like champagne bubbles, and waves of laughter spread from the nearby guests. Yes, Carol chimed in, approaching with a self-satisfied smile. That would be just perfect for you. Elizabeth took a slow, deliberate breath. 10 years seemed to flash by in an instant, and she realized that, after all this time, nothing had truly changed. I'll do that, she smiled gracefully, a hint of mystery in her expression. Enjoy your baby shower. Elizabeth departed the venue with flawless posture and elegance, her luxury brand heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Behind her, her mother and sister exchanged triumphant laughs as new gossip began to circulate among the guests. In the hallway, Elizabeth paused by a window. Boston's cityscape shimmered in the evening light. Among the buildings, she could pinpoint where her restaurant, the Hidden Gem, stood. Melanie and her mother watched Elizabeth's silhouette through the window, backlit by the setting sun. She radiated an almost divine dignity, yet to them, she appeared as nothing more than a pitiable failure. Elizabeth headed towards the elevator, her steps feeling a bit lighter than usual, because she knew the moment for the truth to be unveiled was steadily drawing nearer. After collecting her jacket from the front desk, Elizabeth exited the hotel and crossed the street. Her mother and sister watched with contented smiles, unaware that their satisfaction would be short-lived. As Elizabeth walked towards the pub, she pulled out her mobile phone. The screen displayed a message from Michelin inspectors, announcing their upcoming visit to her restaurant. A subtle, graceful smile touched Elizabeth's lips. 1 week after the baby shower, Carol was reading the Boston Globe over breakfast, as was her habit. A large headline caught her eye. The Hidden Gem, Boston's culinary treasure. Next to stunning photographs of the food was the name Chef Liz. James, look at this article, Melanie said, peering over her husband's shoulder. The Hidden Gem. Isn't that the restaurant that's impossible to get into? The article continued with a detailed profile of the restaurant, describing how the renovated red brick building in Beacon Hill housed an exclusive space with just 20 seats, decorated with crystal chandeliers and antique furniture. Even Harvard's president is a regular, James remarked, impressed. The executives at our bank have been trying to secure reservations for ages, but there's usually a 3-month wait. Carol read the article meticulously. Chef Liz had opened this restaurant 10 years ago, quietly but consistently building her reputation with innovative cuisine influenced by her training in France. She had earned 2 Michelin stars and was aiming even higher. Should we try to go? Melanie suggested. It's such a renowned restaurant, right in our neighborhood. However, making a reservation proved to be far from simple. They were informed they needed a letter of recommendation, and even then, the recommender had to be a customer approved by the restaurant. How pretentious, Carol muttered, displeased. The fact that even they, with their newfound status, couldn't easily access this restaurant stung their pride. That afternoon, while shopping in the Beacon Hill area, Carol happened to pass by the Hidden Gem. The old building was softly bathed in the afternoon sunlight. The interior was hidden from view. There, she witnessed an unexpected scene. Elizabeth stepped out of a luxury car that had pulled up in front of the restaurant. Though dressed in her usual simple style, her demeanor carried an unfamiliar air of dignity. Following Elizabeth was a renowned artist Carol had seen on television. To her astonishment, the artist was speaking to Elizabeth with the ease of an old friend. Elizabeth, thank you for another incredible meal. I was moved yet again today. The honor is all mine. Thank you for coming. Carol froze in her tracks upon hearing this exchange. Elizabeth's voice possessed a confidence and composure she had never heard before. From inside the restaurant, staff members emerged one by one, bowing deeply to Elizabeth. Their attitude wasn't merely that of colleagues. It was the respect shown to a revered leader. Chef, regarding today's Michelin inspector visit, a man who appeared to be the sous chef approached Elizabeth and spoke quietly. Yes, proceed as planned. Elizabeth's response was remarkably calm. Carol watched intently from behind the building. There was no trace of the Elizabeth she knew, the shameful figure who supposedly worked at a pub. Upon returning home, Carol immediately called Melanie. "I saw something unbelievable today." Melanie listened, puzzled by her mother's agitated voice. "I saw Elizabeth going into the hidden gem, and she seemed like a regular there, or maybe even more than that." "No way," Melanie's voice trembled. They desperately tried to piece together past events. Elizabeth's reserved demeanor, her deliberate avoidance of social circles, her profound knowledge of cuisine. Fragmentary memories slowly began to connect. That night, Melanie and James started researching the hidden gem more thoroughly. The restaurant's website only briefly mentioned Chef Liz's background with no photographs. However, gourmet magazines and review sites were brimming with praise for the establishment. Melanie found an old gourmet magazine interview. It says Chef Liz trained at a 3-Michelin-starred restaurant in France until 10 years ago. 10 years ago? James mused. That's when Elizabeth suddenly started to distance herself from us. Melanie opened the baby shower photos on her smartphone. There was a picture of Elizabeth's back as she left the venue. Looking at it now, it wasn't the posture of a defeated person at all. Rather, it was full of poise and confidence. "Could we have?" Melanie's voice was lost in the darkness of the room. The next morning, Carol returned to the hidden gem, this time during the early morning preparations. Delivery trucks were bringing in premium ingredients one after another. Among them, Elizabeth could be seen, meticulously inspecting each item. Dressed in a white chef's coat, Elizabeth looked like a different person from the daughter Carol knew. The staff followed her instructions efficiently. There was an unwavering trust built over 10 years. Carol felt her chest tighten. The daughter she had scorned as a pub employee was, in fact, a renowned chef respected by everyone. And they hadn't realized this for a decade. The truth was fully revealed 2 weeks after the baby shower. Taste of Boston, the leading gourmet magazine in the city, ran a special feature on the Hidden Gem's 10th anniversary. Elizabeth's photograph was prominently displayed on the cover. She stood in her kitchen wearing a white chef's coat, her expression dignified. The headline read, "The True Face of Chef Liz, the story behind the 2-Michelin-star hidden gem." Melanie happened to pick up the magazine in a hospital waiting room. When she saw her sister's photo, she nearly fainted. After graduating from Boston University 10 years ago, Elizabeth Wilson trained at prestigious restaurants in France. Upon returning to the U.S., she immediately opened the hidden gem, as the beloved protégé of legendary chef Jean-Pierre Dubois. The article detailed Elizabeth's brilliant career, her training period in France, her experience at 3-Michelin-starred restaurants, and her entrepreneurial spirit after returning home. Everything had been perfectly orchestrated. The cuisine of Chef Liz, also known as Elizabeth Wilson, is creative, combining classic French techniques with modern arrangements. Her signature dish, Landscape of Memories, beautifully expresses French traditions while utilizing New England ingredients. Melanie was so engrossed in the article that she forgot about her prenatal checkup. There was a side to her sister she had never known. Elizabeth was acclaimed by global gastronomes. The hidden gem is consistently booked 3 months in advance. However, this isn't merely about popularity. Elizabeth Wilson maintains a policy of welcoming only guests who truly understand value. Reservations require letters of recommendation from existing customers. This strict approach reflects her sincere dedication to cuisine. After finishing the article, Melanie immediately called her mother, but Carol had already seen it. She sat in her living room, trembling as she read it over and over. Elizabeth Wilson's restaurant isn't just a place for fine dining. It's an intersection of art and culture. Harvard professors, artists, writers, they all cherish this place as their hideaway. The article concluded with a quote from Elizabeth. "In cuisine, what matters isn't superficial decoration, but essential value. And I want to share that joy only with those who can understand it." Those words seemed like a quiet rebuke to her family. That evening, James attended an executive meeting at his investment bank, an uncharacteristic expression of anxiety on his face. In the conference room, the chairman asked with a smirk, "Is it true that the Hidden Gem's owner chef is your sister-in-law? We've been trying to get a reservation for over 6 months without success. Couldn't you perhaps arrange something through your family connection?" James struggled to respond. Having previously claimed that his sister-in-law worked at a pub, he couldn't now admit the truth. "I apologize, I'm not familiar with the details." A heavy silence filled the conference room as the bank executives' gazes pierced James. Many of them knew that securing a reservation at the Hidden Gem had become a status symbol. That night, Carol and Melanie met in front of the Hidden Gem. Warm light spilled from the restaurant's windows. Inside the packed restaurant, upper-class guests were enjoying an elegant evening, savoring Elizabeth's cuisine. What have we done? Melanie's voice trembled. That day, telling her to go to a pub, Carol was overwhelmed with intense regret as she recalled her past behavior. She had judged her daughter based on superficial values, without ever trying to understand her. And most ironically, Elizabeth had already established a firm position in the very upper-class society they so desperately aspired to join. The next morning, Carol tried to make a reservation. She received the usual polite response. A letter of recommendation was required. "I'm sorry, I am Elizabeth Wilson's mother," Carol's voice quavered. A moment of silence on the other end. "Please wait while I check with the chef." A few minutes later, the call resumed. "We apologize, but the chef has requested that you follow the normal reservation procedure." At that moment, Carol understood everything. 10 years of contempt and scorn. She was overwhelmed by the consequences of continuously judging her daughter based on superficial appearances. Melanie felt the same way. Despite being less than a month from her due date, she visited the hidden gem almost daily. All she could do was watch from afar as the aroma of cooking wafted out and satisfied customers came and went. One day, Melanie gathered her courage and entered the restaurant, but Elizabeth was nowhere to be seen. Reservations require a letter of recommendation from existing customers. Just then, Elizabeth emerged from the kitchen. The sisters' eyes met. Elizabeth looked at Melanie with a calm expression, as if looking at a stranger. "Do you have a letter of recommendation, ma'am?" Those words weighed heavier than 10 years of revenge. Melanie fled the restaurant in tears. From a distance, she could see the line of luxury cars at the hidden gem. Ironically, the symbol of the world they aspired to was in her sister's hands. Meanwhile, Elizabeth continued creating perfect dishes, as usual. In her heart there was no longer anger or hatred, only a quiet resignation towards her family, who couldn't grasp true value. A few days later, Carol and Melanie found an envelope in their mailbox. It was a letter written in Elizabeth's beautiful handwriting on high-quality paper. When opened, it contained a short message. "True value lies not in superficial decoration but in essence. If you are ready to understand that." A month after receiving Elizabeth's letter, Melanie gave birth to a baby girl. A bouquet arrived at the hospital room. The card simply said, "Congratulations." But Elizabeth's handwriting was unmistakable. The bouquet from the hidden gem was different from the other lavish floral arrangements in the hospital room. The simple arrangement, incorporating seasonal wildflowers, had a gentle kindness that soothed the heart of anyone who saw it. It seemed to embody Elizabeth's cuisine itself. "Mom," Melanie spoke to her mother while holding her newborn, "what should we do?" Carol silently gazed out the window. She had already called several times, trying to get a reservation at the hidden gem, but each time she received only polite refusals. Then one day another letter arrived from Elizabeth. "If you truly want to understand, why don't you try working at the restaurant? Starting from the bottom. To understand essence, one must begin with the basics." The proposal struck Carol and Melanie like a thunderbolt. Their newly acquired pride urged immediate rejection. However, they had no other options left. 3 months after giving birth, Melanie stood in the hidden gem's kitchen for the first time. Not in a pristine white chef's coat, but in a dishwasher's apron. Carol also started working weekends as a dining room assistant. The first few weeks were grueling. Melanie's hands grew rough from the unfamiliar hard work, and Carol's feet ached terribly. However, Elizabeth showed them no special treatment. "Things of value take time to understand," was all Elizabeth said. But as time passed, they gradually began to change. While washing dishes, Melanie started to feel the passion poured into each of Elizabeth's dishes. Carol began to understand the true meaning of hospitality as she watched customers' delighted faces. After 6 months, Melanie had her first chance to taste Elizabeth's cooking. It was during a staff tasting session after a meeting. This taste. Tears rolled down Melanie's cheeks. 10 years of her sister's feelings were encapsulated in that dish. A year passed. Carol was formally hired as dining room staff, while Melanie became an apprentice cook. Their attitudes and values had changed remarkably. The glamour of their former social circle no longer attracted them. Instead, they developed eyes that could recognize true value. Carol began attending psychological counseling to confront her past beliefs. Melanie learned cooking basics from scratch, developing a sincere approach to her work. One night after closing, Elizabeth called them both over. "Starting tomorrow, shall we meet as family?" Carol and Melanie choked up at these words. It meant more than mere forgiveness. It marked the beginning of a new bond between people who understood essential value. The following Sunday, the hidden gem welcomed a special morning. Though normally open only for dinner, the restaurant opened that day for Carol, Melanie, and the 18-month-old baby. Elizabeth prepared a special brunch for her family. It was a series of dishes without fancy decoration but filled with deep love. The wildflowers on the table held the same simple kindness as the bouquet that had arrived at the hospital. "This is my true feeling," Elizabeth said as she brought out a dish. "I'm proud that you've learned to see essence rather than appearance." Outside the window, Boston's streets were bathed in morning light. The red brick walls of the hidden gem quietly watched over this new family story. It was the dawn of a new beginning, earned by understanding true value.